Parker, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated. I was just laughing because I think I put on a slight radio voice uh, when I hit record, but I guess I can't help myself. But thank you again. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights and wisdom here on the show.
Yeah, likewise. Glad to be here. Thanks for the conversation. I think it's a good topic to dig into.
Awesome. Well, real quick, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your career background and how you became a customer success QBR, which we'll dive into here in a second, expert.
Yeah, no, thanks. So I've been doing customer success for a long time, probably about 20 years, building, scaling out various customer programs. Started with account management, moved into customer success when that became more mainstream around 2010, I guess, around that time. And I've just built out several really great programs. I've had the great fortune of working at some awesome companies, contributed to 6 successful exits, which was awesome. And then around 2020, I started getting more exposed towards early stage companies. I became a limited partner over at Stage 2 Capital, which is a venture capital firm out of Boston, and really kind of ignited a passion of mine to help early stage companies with their building out their own customer experiences. So really focusing on driving recurring revenues and expanding on retention and even reputation and such. So in 2023, I decided to move to become a full-time operator, and from an old full-time operator to become a full-time consultant / advisor / fractional CS leader, and started my own company called Xperience Alchemy, and I haven't looked back.
Awesome. First of all, shout out to the Stage 2 folks. Mark and Andy are very, very good friends.
Yeah.
And so really appreciate them and everything they do for the startup and innovation ecosystem, right? So
yeah. Phenomenal organization, great LPs, just incredible go-to-market experience.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive into the topic at hand here. Why are QBRs broken?
Yeah, it's a good one. I like this one for a couple of reasons, because I think we tend to fall back on kind of traditional methods, especially when we get busy and we haven't had the time to really get more creative with our approaches and such. But yeah, my opinion here is QBRs are broken, and I think they're misused in a lot of different ways. So we should probably start just by maybe 2 disclaimers up front. So we're saying QBR, which of course indicates quarterly. They don't have to be, of course. And so a lot of different acronyms out there: SBRs, EBRs, whatever your flavor. We're talking about the same thing. But I think for today, just to keep it simple, we'll talk about QBRs and just understand that they're applying to all. It doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be quarterly. And then 2, I think. You're probably, if you're doing QBRs, you're probably focusing on enterprise customers. And today there's just this massive focus on scale and efficiency. So, when a customer is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on your solution, they should probably expect to get a QBR of some sorts. And so you want to spend some time with them. I'm not advocating that you don't. I think in certain, depending on your business, it's going to make a lot of sense. But again, I think bringing the right tool to the job is super important. So rather than just going with a formulaic QBR model, I think it's important to bring the right tool and the right approach.
One thing that comes to mind as I've worked with a lot of CS folks over the years, and this is somewhat related to when I've been part of organizations that maybe had full cycle, even post-sales sales folks, or sales folks, I should say, focused on even post-sales stuff. And then, the prospecting piece as well. When we've looked at the efficiency and effectiveness of that particular role, we always end up going back and saying, all right, well, assuming we have the financial resources to do this, we've usually figured it out anyways.
Yeah.
We'll then start to specialize, right? So we'll start to say, okay, well, we're going to do like the SDR that's just going to focus on appointment setting. Maybe some of them will do some initial discovery calls, and then, have that salesperson absolutely focus on qualified, well positioned prospects, right? And then that kind of started to happen also on the back end, right? And I know there's some ways to incentivize those great handoffs at all those kind of touch points where they're required. But one thing that I started to also see was that the customer success rep started to get so much on their plate that they were just kind of checking boxes, right? So it
Yeah.
wasn't really that trusted consultant that sat next to you and said, all right, we have a contract, the sales stuff, the transactions all done. Now we're gonna truly make you succeed. It was more like, let me just scramble and put together that QBR or whatever sort of progress report at whatever cadence, and I'm just gonna throw it to you. And I can't tell you how many times I sat down with CS folks over the years, and they're just like burned out, right? And like
That's
and
true.
so there is that human element. Any sort of like advice you would give go to market folks, CROs out there who have to kind of like navigate this and maybe are historically not looking at it in a more qualitative way?
Yeah, yeah, man, what a great point you're bringing up. So, I think the one thing I would say is that you're right. I think customer success has, in some cases, drifted away from their charter, and what I mean by that is that the function itself has gotten so bloated and so overwhelmed with kind of all things. In fact, I even used to describe this in my role early on as saying like, "Hey, I'm in customer success. Anything that impacts a customer satisfaction is something that I care about." Early on, that was okay, but over time, as we scale and as the market changed, that's not sustainable. And so, what you're talking about with specialization is spot on. I think I think CS needs to take a step back, and when we think about QBRs as an example of this, we are measuring the output more than we're measuring the outcomes. And so what happens, and in some cases, CRMs are partially to blame to this. Management in terms of how they measure team productivity and activities and such. It's all focused on, did you do the QBR? And maybe it did, but maybe it didn't have great results. But it's not the results that matter. It's so much as the, did you do this thing? And so we've filled up the CSM's time so much with, I think, a lot of busy work, which maybe aren't driving the right level of impact. So it's great comment to, I think, tie into this one, which is that QBRs need to be reinvigorated. The expectations have changed. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of QBRs suck these days.
Another thing that comes to mind is the role of like a consultant. Let's just say that you hired McKinsey or Deloitte or whatever, or some other consultancy, and they join your team, yeah, as a consultant, but they're supposed to really care, right? And dig into your organization. And there's only so many clients they can manage effectively, right? Or else they'll start to go into robotic workflows, and and everything sort of gets depleted, I think, largely speaking, right?
Mm,
And if you think about the customer success person, and by the way, those consultants, right, they're giving QBRs or their own version of these pretty consistently. How do we sort of like scale a CS organization now, understanding that quality is super, super important, and yet to be able to do this in an effective way, you really have to dig in. You have to be that trusted consultant as a CS person.
yep. Yeah, so you're speaking to, I think, some of the challenges with QBRs right now. So I like what you're saying is, look, as a customer success manager, a former customer success manager myself, as a former customer success leader, and now as a consultant, I can draw a direct parallel. Like, all of those roles are very consultative in nature. And if you're not coming to the table with best practices and guidance that's really centered around the customer's needs and the customer's business, you're missing the mark. So I think we talk a lot about our features. We talk a lot about our products, and that's our comfort zone. Like a lot of CSM teams that I know, they're very focused on the product. They are product experts. They know everything there is to know about the platform, but they know very little about their customers' business. And so that creates a gap in terms of establishing that trust and that advice and being able to guide that customer successfully. And QBRs kind of fall into that same bucket, I think. So it's an attempt to align the business, your company as the vendor with their company as the customer, and make sure that you're all moving in the same direction. Um, a lot of the QBRs that I've seen, I mean, they've become bloated, like absolutely bloated. Like we're trying to cram all the information we can into the QBR itself, and then it just becomes death by PowerPoint. You add all these slides and charts. You get really enamored with your own content, and you follow maybe a template that's been given to you. CSMs become afraid to go off script, even though it might benefit the conversation or what they're looking for. And they tend to be kind of just like this one size fits all, which as a consultant, you really can't do. You've really got to pivot your approach based on the needs of the person on the other side of the table. So I think that's one of the main problems with QBRs is they just become formulaic, and you do enough of them as a customer, you start to get pretty tired of them, and it's just like, I don't really want to participate in this anymore. This is not something that's meaningful for me or a good use of my time. I could probably just log into the platform, get this data myself, or hey, just send me some slides. I'll take a look at it next week when I have time. But the presentation aspect of it is so much information that oftentimes it just can't possibly be retained.
Yeah. I think that as a client, right, of a software vendor who's working with a CS person, if the QBR is a shock, right, and you're not aware of that stuff, right, like there's probably something going on, right? Some
Yes.
miscommunication. That CS person is not doing their job, right? I wanted to ask you, so like, how do we fix this? How do we achieve those, the value that we seek?
Yeah. First of all, so let me just rip through, I think, a few of the problems that exist today, and I think we can talk about some solutions to it. So one, as I mentioned, they're bloated. It's information overload. You can't process all the things and retain all the information that's being presented. Usually they're rear view looking. So you're looking at all the things that have occurred, and there's probably some great accomplishments, milestones that you've achieved and things like that, which should be celebrated. But I think a lot of the QBRs that I've sat through and seen tend to dwell too much on the past and not enough on the future. So it's okay. Like you can extract lessons from that, but it tends to drift into the realm of being negative, and there's certain bias that I think appear too. So I mean, recency bias. If you've had a recent experience, you tend to spend a lot of time addressing that situation that might have just happened last week, as opposed to the greater body of work, and so you miss a lot of the insights that might be gathered there. I think they're super costly to create. So you think about all the time and the resources that are required to build the deck and the different teams that have to contribute, the coordination that's required. You talked about how busy CSMs are. They are pulling their hair out when they're trying to pull together these, multi-team groups to contribute to the deck. And oftentimes those slides aren't even prepared until like the night before. I've even had folks miss out on the dinner with the customer because they were finishing the slides for the deck for the next day, which is just, it's a misappropriation of tools. I think the most important thing though is that we talk way too much. So I think when, as the vendor, you're presenting to the customer the state of the relationship, we tend to consume too much of the talk time. And what's really, really critical in a QBR that done well is giving the customer the opportunity to present the state of their business to you, having all of your stakeholders around the table so that you can then derive, insights on what they're looking for. How does our product impact their overall top line, bottom line, et cetera, their business results? And it's less about our product and what we're working on, what our roadmap is, which logos we just signed, that sort of a thing. You've got executives and decision makers in the room. You've got to maximize the opportunity to use them, get them talking. And so the faster you can kind of get them into a conversation and just shut up and listen, I think you get a lot more value off of those.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. If you had to think about the future, right? And we have AI, we have organizations that, even though it's unclear if we're still in the, I don't know, I don't like to be using words like down markets and things like that, but
Yeah.
certainly over the last 3 years or so, give or take, we've seen organizations evolve around their efficiency and so on. So we have all these factors. What do you think a world-class customer success program looks like in 2025 and beyond, right?
What a provocative question. It's the one that everyone's talking about right now, right? So yeah, I think you're right, and as a retention guy, I can say very clearly, like the rules have fundamentally changed out there. So when we think about whether it's AI and the disruption that that's causing in the market, or the transition from grow at all costs to sustainable growth, there's a lot of pressure on retention now, and I think that is really becoming like the key driver of a healthy company. So puts a lot of pressure on CS, and fairly or unfairly, CS is attributed to the retention results. And so, my personal feeling is that 2025 is going to bring a greater focus on the company level responsibility of retention, because it really is the entire experience that that customer is having is going to dictate whether or not that customer stays or doesn't stay with you. And so I do think that while CS plays a very important role in delivering success to customers, or rather, I like to say, helping make our customers successful, which is a slightly different application
Mm,
of the same words, right? Um, the company is going to be incredibly responsible for it. So, as a CS leader, I spent a lot of my time looking upstream, finding out where the friction was happening within the customer lifecycle, which was ultimately resulting in challenges for my team or for the relationship that we were managing. And that requires a lot of cross-functional work with product, with sales, with implementation, with marketing, et cetera. But yeah, ultimately, I mean, we've got a hyper competitive environment out there. Hyper competitive. I mean, AI has thrown fuel on the fire, because now we've got an easier path to bring products to market with AI, and it's fundamentally disruptive. I mean, there are companies that are almost overnight going out of business, or finding that their product market fit has just evaporated because of some new disruptive technology. You could have the best CS team in the world, and they're not going to be able to combat irrelevance, right? So if you have a product that was doing some, a couple of recent examples, like Chegg, public company, and they just got completely upended by ChatGPT, lost like $14 billion worth of market cap or something in a very short period of time. It's real, and I don't think that's an anomaly. I think that is probably just the start of what we're going to start to see, which is a consolidation. So, to your question, which is a really important one, like, what can you do about it? Because we can't just wave the white flag, right? So, I would say that CS needs to focus on what they can control. And so that's going to spend a lot of focus and energy around proactive engagement with your customers, focusing on those early warning signals, really investing in that constant value realization and ROI. You talked about being a consultant earlier. We've got to be really consultative with our customers to help them navigate this world as well. I think it's synthesizing and providing regular customer feedback back to the company. They've got to, the executives, the product team, et cetera, they've got to know what the signals are, and they've got to be able to adjust their programs accordingly. And then, as I said, I think you're building those bridges with the other departments. This is going to be a cross-functional effort that's required, I think, to weather this storm. So it's getting better handoffs from sales. It's hoping working with your onboarding team so that customers are getting first value faster, and achieving better outcomes before they get handed off to that life cycle management. Working with product to address the right use cases, and support on the other end to make sure that there's more self-service for customers, and a better experience when something goes wrong.
awesome. Parker, thank you so much for just again sharing your wisdom and insights. I know you've been doing this for a while and you can see around the corner. First of all, if folks wanted to hire you to help with their customer experience, customer success strategies, what, why should they and where can they go to do so?
Yeah, great question. So, look, as I said, I've been doing this for a long time. I think as an operator, I've got some unique insights in terms of building out programs at different size companies. So I've done everything from seed to large public companies, and so I've seen sort of the growth patterns that emerge and what's appropriate for each stages. So yeah, if folks want to get in touch with me, LinkedIn is a great place to go. You can go to my website, xperiencealchemy.com, experience spelled with an X. But yeah, looking forward to connecting with folks. And I just love talking shop anyway. So if people just want to mull around on a problem, I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. Well, have a wonderful day and thanks so much.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it.